Ethan and Leela had always loved discovering hidden getaways, but when they booked the secluded Airbnb at the edge of town, neither of them realized that this charming cottage held a darkness far older than the forest surrounding it. From the moment they stepped inside, shadows moved on their own. Whispers echoed through empty hallways, and the mirrors reflected more than just their faces. Something was waiting, watching, and it didn't plan to let them leave. I had been traveling for weeks, moving from one city to another, never staying in the same place for long. My routine was simple: arrive in a new town, find a place to stay, explore during the day, and write at night. This time, I was looking for somewhere quiet, somewhere off the beaten path, a place that promised a break from the constant noise of the cities. When I found the listing, a small Airbnb on the outskirts of a sleepy town, hidden behind dense trees and winding roads. The description was enticing: experience peace, solitude and nature at your doorstep. The photos looked perfect: a quaint cottage with weathered wooden walls, a small porch and windows that reflected the surrounding forest. It seemed like the ideal escape. I arrived late in the afternoon. The sun was already dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. As I stepped out of the car, I felt it, a heaviness in the air, almost like the forest itself was holding its breath, watching me. The house looked inviting, but the silence around it was unnatural. I approached the front door, keys in hand, and noticed the wood had a slight grayish tint, as if it had absorbed years of weather and secrets. The moment I turned the key and pushed the door open, a musty smell hit me. A strange mixture of damp wood, mold, and something metallic I couldn't identify. I hesitated for a moment, my gut tightening, but I convinced myself old houses always smelled like this. Inside the house was minimal but tidy. Furniture was sparse: just a few chairs, a small table, and a bookshelf with old dusty books. But something about the layout felt wrong. The mirrors, there were mirrors everywhere, lining the hallway, leaning against walls, even one above the fireplace. I couldn't understand why there were so many, reflecting the dim light in odd angles that made the rooms look longer than they should. I felt my stomach churn every time I glanced at them, as though they were silently watching me. I dropped my bag in the bedroom and tried to shake off the unease. The bed was neatly made, the sheets crisp, and the room had a faint scent of lavender. I told myself it was just the isolation, the unfamiliar stonings. I went to the window and looked out. Trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, but in the fading light, some of the shadows seemed too dark, too deliberate. Something moved just beyond the edge of the forest, a flicker that disappeared the moment I blinked. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind against the windows like whispers. I kept thinking I heard someone walking in the hallways, slow, deliberate steps that stopped when I froze in fear. I stayed under the blankets, eyes wide, heart hammering. Then I noticed it, my reflection in the largest mirror across the room. At first it was normal, I could see myself staring back, but then, for a fraction of a second, my reflection didn't move. When I did, my own movements were delayed, and for that brief moment, I felt a cold, unnatural disconnect between me and what I was seeing. I sat up, holding my breath, convinced it was my imagination. The room was silent. I slowly leaned closer to the mirror, staring into my own eyes, trying to convince myself it had just been a trick of the shadows. But then I saw it again, a shadow behind me, or perhaps inside me, a flicker in the reflection that didn't belong. I spun around, but the room was empty. My pulse raced as I backed away from the mirror, my hands trembling. The more I looked, the more the mirror seemed wrong, stretching in strange ways, bending corners of the room I knew weren't there. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt distorted. I eventually sank back onto the bed, too terrified to sleep but too exhausted to move. Every creak, every whisper of wind, every flicker of shadow felt amplified, as if the house itself was alive, watching me, waiting. And then, just as I felt a fragile thread of calm, I saw it, my own reflection smiling. I wasn't smiling. My reflection grinned, slowly, deliberately, a cruel twist of lips that mirrored nothing of me. The room went cold, my skin prickling as if invisible hands had brushed against me. I shut my eyes, forcing myself to believe it was a trick, but deep down, I knew something was in the house with me, something that had been waiting, watching, and now it was awake. Morning came, but the sunlight did nothing to ease the knot of fear tightening in my chest. The house was still quiet, almost too quiet, as if it were holding its breath and waiting for me to make a mistake. I moved cautiously through the hallway, my eyes darting to every mirror. Each one seemed to twist the light, reflecting angles of the rooms that shouldn't exist. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, the effect of exhaustion and isolation. But even as I repeated it, a cold dread crept up my spine. The kitchen looked normal at first. A small table with 2 chairs, a sink with neatly stacked dishes, a cupboard filled with basic supplies. But when I glanced at the knives, my stomach churned. Each blade was smeared with a faint, dark residue that glinted unnaturally in the morning light. I couldn't tell if it was rust or something worse, and I didn't want to touch them to find out. The cupboards, drawers, even the fridge, all perfectly clean, except for those knives. I shook my head and forced myself to breathe slowly, convincing myself to focus on leaving as soon as possible. I decided to check upstairs, hoping for a door or a window that might offer a way out. The stairs creaked under my weight, louder than they should have, echoing through the house like a warning. At the top, the hallway stretched further than I remembered. The mirrors multiplied, reflecting themselves infinitely, and the shadows they cast seemed to move even when nothing else did. I tried the bedroom door, but it slammed shut with a force that made my heart leap into my throat. I pulled, pushed, screamed into the empty hallway, but it didn't budge. Panic rose in my chest like a living thing, suffocating me. Then I saw the notebook on the nightstand. I had not noticed it the night before. Its cover was worn, the edges frayed, as if it had been handled by countless hands. Trembling, I opened it. The pages were filled with messy handwriting, detailed entries about guests who stayed in the house. At first I thought they were normal journal notes, but the entries quickly grew darker. Visitors who never left, who became trapped in the mirrors, whose reflections were claimed by the house. My stomach churned, and I slammed the notebook shut, but my hands were shaking too much to calm myself. I tried to leave the room again, banging on the door until my knuckles ached, but the lock didn't give. The house had trapped me. Every time I peered into a mirror, I saw a flicker of movement, shadows lingering where nothing should exist. And then I heard its soft, wet breathing, coming from the corner of the room. I froze, my chest tight. I scanned the shadows, convinced I was imagining it, but the sound persisted, rhythmic and slow, like something waiting for me to approach. My pulse thudded in my ears. I backed away from the sound, my fingers grazing the notebook, and for a moment, the handwriting seemed to shift, the words rearranging themselves under my gaze. Lines I hadn't read before appeared, warnings written in a hurried scrawl. Don't look behind you. They are always closer than they appear. I turned abruptly, and the corner of the room seemed empty, but the shadows were longer now, stretching unnaturally, creeping along the walls and floor like living things. Hours passed, though I couldn't tell. The house seemed to warp time, making minutes feel like hours and hours feel like seconds. I tried the windows, even the front door, but every exit was locked, jammed, or led me back to the same hallway I had walked 100 times. My mind raced, spinning in panic and confusion. I could feel eyes on me constantly, reflected in every surface, judging, watching, waiting for me to falter. As night fell again, I realized the mirrors were no longer just reflecting me, they were alive with movement. Faces flickered in the corners, brief and horrifying glimpses of people I had never met. Eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams. And then I saw it just for a moment, a hand reaching out from one of the mirrors, pale and thin, clawing toward me with nails like splintered glass. My scream caught in my throat as I stumbled backward, tripping over the carpet, heart hammering like a drum. I collapsed onto the bed, clutching the notebook to my chest, and that's when I noticed the last, chilling detail. The handwriting on the final page was fresh, wet-looking, as if it had been written that very moment. My blood ran cold. The words were simple, but they made my skin crawl. They are watching. Your time is almost theirs. The room grew colder, the breathing louder, closer, and I realized with a shiver I couldn't explain that I was not alone. Something was waiting for me, in the shadows, in the mirrors, and I had no idea how to escape. By the third night, exhaustion had settled into my bones, but it didn't bring relief, only a sharper sense of unease. Sleep was impossible. Every shadow in the dimly lit house seemed to slither across the walls, stretching toward me as I moved. The mirrors had multiplied, each one reflecting a slightly different version of the house, slightly warped, slightly wrong. I started noticing things I hadn't seen before. Scratches along the floorboards, deep gouges in the wood that looked like claws had ripped through, and faint handprints smudged across the walls, far too high for me to reach. I didn't dare touch them, fearing that some trace of those marks might attach to me. I needed to leave. I needed to escape before whatever was in the house claimed me completely. I tried the front door first, jerking at the lock, banging my fists, but it wouldn't budge. The lock seemed fused with the frame, immovable, as if the house had grown around it overnight. Panic rose, thick and suffocating. I ran from room to room, searching for another way out, but every door I opened led me back to the same hallway. The walls seemed longer than they had before, the ceiling higher, the light dimmer. It was impossible. The house was changing, shifting around me, reshaping itself in ways I could not comprehend. That's when I saw her. I didn't know who she was, or what she was, but she was there, standing in the largest mirror in the living room, pale, almost translucent, and impossibly still. Her face was featureless, only dark hollows where her eyes should have been. Yet I felt her gaze pierce me, cold and unrelenting. My heart slammed against my ribs as I spun around, desperate to confront the presence, but the room was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, she was gone. And yet, even when she wasn't visible, I could feel her watching, lurking just beyond perception. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Exhaustion, stress, isolation, they could play tricks on the mind. But it didn't explain the other things. Objects subtly shifting positions when I wasn't looking. Shadows curling at impossible angles. Whispers that seemed to follow me from room to room. I could hear them now, low and urgent. murmuring in a language I didn't understand, yet the tone was unmistakably sinister. My chest tightened, a cold sweat running down my back. I was not alone in this house. The mirrors were the worst. I couldn't look away from them, though every glance made me tremble. Each reflection contained fragments of movement that weren't mind shapes behind me, fleeting flashes of pale skin or hollow eyes. Sometimes I swore I saw dozens of faces staring back at me, pressing against the glass as if trying to escape or pull me in. I started avoiding mirrors entirely, walking through rooms with my eyes cast downward. Yet the shadows found me anyway, creeping at the edge of my vision, just beyond the reach of light. Desperation overtook me. I searched for anything that might help me break the spell of the house, a door, a window, even a trapdoor. Every attempt failed. Each exit was either locked, warped, or led me back to the same hallway I had walked 100 times before. My sense of direction collapsed entirely. The house was a labyrinth, impossible to navigate, twisting around me like a living organism. Every step I took felt futile, and my mind began to fracture under the pressure of relentless fear. And then I realized the mirrors were no longer just reflections, they were windows. I could see inside them glimpses of previous visitors, their faces twisted in terror, their hands pressed to the glass as if trapped. Some were screaming silently, mouths moving without sound, eyes wide and pleading. Their reflections reached toward me, beckoning, warning, yet unable to escape. My stomach churned as the horrifying thought struck me. This was my fate too, if I didn't find a way out. I backed into the corner of the room, clutching the notebook, reading the pages frantically. Every entry described the same cycle. Visitors arrived, explored, noticed the mirrors, and eventually disappeared. The handwriting shifted, urgent, almost alive, whispering a warning I could not ignore. They take what they want. Do not resist. You will become their next reflection. The air grew cold, thicker, heavier. I could hear breathing now, wet, slow, circling me, following my every move. And then I saw it again, my reflection, but wrong. My eyes were empty hollows, my lips curled into a smile that I wasn't making. The figure in the mirror leaned closer, its grin widening as it whispered my name, echoing inside my head, mocking me. My chest tightened, and a scream lodged in my throat. I turned to run, but the walls shifted, closing in. The shadows pressed against me, the mirrors multiplied, and I understood with a paralyzing certainty that the house had claimed me already, or it was in the process of doing so. Desperation had completely taken hold of me by the fourth night. Sleep no longer existed, and the few hours of rest I had managed were filled with dreams that bled seamlessly into reality. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every whisper of the wind became a threat. The house was no longer a passive structure. It was alive, aware, and malicious. I had tried doors, windows, even crawling along the floor to find some hidden exit. But each attempt led me back to the same long hallway, the mirrors multiplying like a maze, trapping me further. The air was thick with a metallic temps, a mixture of decay and damp wood, pressing against my lungs with every breath. I thought of breaking a window for escape. In the back room I found one that seemed less warped, its frame old but intact. I grabbed a heavy chair and smashed the glass, shards flying like miniature daggers. My hands were cut almost immediately, crimson lines forming as I crawled through the jagged edges. But as soon as I tried to step into the outside world, my foot hit nothing but air, and I fell forward only to find myself back inside the hallway. The shattered glass reassembled as if it had never been broken. Panic spiraled into terror. The house was mocking me, reshaping itself to trap me even further. I began to notice the details I had previously ignored, walls pulsing ever so slightly, shadows curling at impossible angles, and the mirrors shifting their reflections. They no longer showed just me. They showed rooms I hadn't entered yet, corners I hadn't seen, figures lurking just out of reach. I could hear the breathing again, wet and deliberate, circling me, sometimes behind me, sometimes in front, always too close. My heart pounded so violently it felt as if it might tear free from my chest. I knew I had to stay calm, but every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee, to do something. I found myself back in the bedroom, clutching the notebook like a lifeline, flipping through the pages. I read the entries over and over, hoping for some guidance, some clue that might save me. That's when I noticed a final passage I had not seen before, written in jagged, hurried script that seemed almost alive. They always try to leave. The house won't let them. Their reflection becomes the new host. Do not fight it. They are patient. The words burned themselves into my mind. I understood now why the mirrors existed. They were not just reflective surfaces but prisons, and the house had been feeding, growing stronger with every trapped visitor. I tried to barricade myself in the bedroom, dragging the bed and chairs against the door, hoping to buy some time. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and I could feel the presence in the room. Something intangible, yet terrifyingly real. I could hear the whispers now, distinct and urgent, repeating my name over and over. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound only grew louder, echoing inside my skull, mocking me. I could feel it moving through the mirrors, through the walls, reaching for me. And then I saw it, my own reflection, staring back at me from the largest mirror in the room. But it wasn't just me. The reflection was smiling, wide and cruel, while I shrank back in fear. Its eyes were empty, black hollows, yet I could feel them boring into my soul. It raised a hand slowly, beckoning me, and I felt an irresistible pull, a compulsion to step closer. My stomach twisted and I stumbled backward, almost falling off the bed. Every instinct told me to run, yet my eyes were glued to that reflection, hypnotized by the impossible, living presence within the glass. Hours or maybe moments passed. Time had no meaning here. The shadows pressed in closer, the mirrors multiplied, and I realized the full horror of the house. It didn't just trap you, it consumed you, reshaped you, made your reflection its own. The whispers grew louder, urgent, insistent. The air was icy, thick with something that smelled of iron and decay. I was trembling, soaked in sweat, yet frozen with fear. And then I saw it again, moving behind my reflection in the mirror. Dozens of faces, pale and twisted, pressed against the glass, silent mouths opening and closing in eternal screams. I fell to the floor, clutching the notebook, my mind teetering on the edge of madness. And that's when I noticed something I had missed before: a faint smear of wet, red fingerprints forming on the edge of the mirror, climbing slowly, deliberately, as if something unseen was pressing itself closer to me. The room grew colder, darker, and I understood, with absolute certainty, that I was no longer just trapped. I was being watched, studied, and prepared for whatever came next. The house wasn't done with me yet. I don't know how long I've been here. Days, weeks, maybe months. It has lost all meaning. The house has become my world, its shadows my only companions, its whispers the only voices I hear. The mirrors are everywhere, and each one shows fragments of reality that I cannot escape. Time stretches and bends. The sun rises and falls outside, but it never touches me. Occasionally I glimpse the world beyond the windows, glimpses of roads, trees, and open sky. But when I try to step through, I pass only through glass and find myself back in the same dim hallway. The house has complete control. I have stopped trying to fight it. Fighting seems useless. The mirrors no longer just reflect me. They contain me, twist me, and distort me. Some reflections move independently, grinning or frowning, always observing. I can see other trapped figures within the glass, people who arrived before me, who struggled and screamed and vanished until all that remained was their frozen reflection. Their eyes follow me as I walk the hallways, silent warnings I cannot ignore. I have begun to understand the rules. The house chooses, it waits, it feeds, and it never forgets. The notebook sits on the nightstand in front of me. Every time I glance at it, I realize new words have appeared, written in a frantic, almost pulsing script, as if the house itself is recording my thoughts. One fresh entry chills me to the bone. Arrival confirmed. Reflection incomplete. Prepare to join them. My heart pounds as I realize what it means. The house doesn't just trap you, it transforms you. Your reflection becomes the new host, waiting to pull the next visitor in. I am becoming part of it already, slowly, invisibly. Last night I saw something I cannot unsee. A mirror in the living room, previously cracked and broken, now perfectly intact, reflected me, but not me entirely. My face was still mine, but my eyes were hollow, black and empty, like the other figures I've seen trapped within the glass. My lips curved into a grin I was not making, and my hands thin and pale pressed against the inside of the mirror, as if trying to escape, though I could feel my body on the other side, alive but trembling. The air thickened, heavy with iron and cold moisture, and I felt an invisible pressure pushing me toward the mirror. I have stopped resisting. Resistance is futile. I walk the halls carefully now, aware of every reflection, every flicker of movement behind the glass. I can see the other reflections watching me, waiting for the moment I become like them. I can feel it, the subtle tug inside my chest, like something is pulling my very essence toward the mirrors. I touch one briefly and recoil. The surface sticky, unreal, almost alive, and I realize I am no longer fully separate from what I see in the glass. And then, just as the dread reaches its peak, I notice something impossible. A new notebook on the nightstand, identical to the first, but with pages blank except for a single line written in my own handwriting. I have arrived. I am the next host. My blood runs cold. I do not remember writing it. I stare at the words, trembling, and in the reflection, I see my own face staring back at me, smiling cruelly, while my real body trembles and freezes. A soft, wet whisper comes from the glass. My name elongated and stretched, promising that leaving will never be an option. I realize now that the house has been patient, teaching me, shaping me, waiting until I understood exactly what it is. It is a predator, and I am its prey, but not entirely prey. I am becoming part of it, a bridge between the house and the next visitor. Somewhere, a new person will arrive, excited to escape the world for a quiet retreat, and I will be waiting in the mirrors, my hollow eyes and grinning mouth their first terrifying glimpse. I try to turn away from the reflection, but I cannot. My body moves toward the glass almost on its own, and I feel my skin cold, sticky, merging with what I see. My own voice whispers through the mirror, mimicking my thoughts, telling me that it is already too late. I press my hands against the surface, and the whispers grow louder, urgent, promising endless waiting, endless watching. The notebook slides from the nightstand to the floor, pages fluttering as if alive. Opening to a page I did not write. Welcome home. The last thing I feel is a pull, subtle but undeniable, and I know that I am no longer alone in the house. My reflection leans closer, smiling wider, and I understand that the cycle will continue forever. Outside, the world moves on, but inside, the mirrors wait, patient and hungry, and I have become their newest inhabitant, trapped in a reflection that will never leave, waiting for the next soul to arrive. The house is alive, and it has claimed me completely.